So that we're here in the Kapelica gallery, and I'm showing two of my most recent installations. So that's the work Nose Patrol, called Nose Patrol, and the Kinetic Garden. Yeah, there's another small work or a small incubator work which is part of both, because that's where the plants start. So this is my most recent work, and it's part of a bigger framework in which I investigate actually the possibilities to work with plants in artworks, and specifically create a kind of observatories to observe their, for me sometimes, really intelligent behavior. It all started with actually this path I'm on right now, started with the work Nose Patrol. That was an idea to address all the senses in one artwork. So I always have been working with senses, so I use sound, movement, and also touch. And so it was like a logical step to also incorporate smell. At that time I did a lot of research on it, and I wanted to make something more aggressive outside of the perfume worlds, because I think smell, it's not only about identity, which we find now in a lot of products we buy. And I think, of course, smell is about much more, and also about space and time and memory. On the research I did, and I was actually stunned by the fact that actually we don't smell any natural smells anymore, except if you're, in nature. But in cities, in big cities, we are bombarded with mostly toxic and synthetic smells, because they're not natural anymore. And so what this does to the limbic and hormonal system is quite intense. So my idea actually was to make something more aggressive, like two cannons that bombard you with like really healthy smells, or also smells that change your mood. That was very interesting, because as an artist to be able also to change someone's mood through an artwork. So there was a lot of experimentation, and I needed the substances, the real 100% pure essential oils and other plant substances. So I actually looked for them, and of course you can buy them, but you're never sure what you get. Then something very funny actually happened, because like 15 years ago I did a restoration project of an Arab water system, irrigation system in Portugal, in a place in the studio I have in Portugal, and I restored the whole system and also the gardens that were part of this irrigation system. And we also planted a lot of trees and herbs and things like that. A lot of vegetation, all kinds of vegetation. And so I was looking for the smells. I said, my God, they're all around me. I just need a way to extract them. So I learned the art of steam distillation, which is an art and a science. You need another life to really master that. But I did a lot of experimentation. I got a lot of smells, also some things that were not in the books, or there was nothing known about it. So I did a lot of experimentation and have like now a variety of possibilities to work with in these machines. So there was a lot of gardening. I went back to the garden and I cultivate plants, but I also collect them in the wild. If there's in certain periods in the year that you collect very interesting plants. And so I went deeper and deeper also into the gardening, and if you have the time to observe what's going on with the plants, it's quite amazing what they can do, and they seem to have really a sense of where they are, and they have ways of communicating. Of course, the essential oils are produced by the plant, not for us, that's for them. So there's this whole world of invisible chemical warfare in a way, because they protect themselves for the heat, for insects, but also for communication. So there was another part that was for me very intriguing, to go into this chemical world and actually use the fragrance as a sculptural medium, because a cloud of smell has a shape. So I thought creating a machine that could visualize the cloud in a way. So it's here you see the smell is made visible and also feelable and hearable, so you can hear it. So I try to, in a way, to really sculpturize the smell. It's an attempt. I mean, it's difficult to do that, but these were the first steps. So the gardening and the smells, everything came together, and then I had this commissioned work for a building, a municipal building in Holland. That is a very modern building, and they had the sick building syndrome. So the air quality was very bad, even though it had a very expensive air conditioning. People would have headaches, you know, tearing eyes, things like that, and fatigue. So they commissioned to investigate ways to incorporate plants on a big scale in buildings, and actually to rethink indoor gardens and gardens in general. So we built this prototype to, in a way, make a hybrid, like a kind of installation that has an artistic part and a scientific part, and a real gardening part. So to see and how you can actually grow not only ornamental plants but also aromatic and medicinal plants, which are of course more difficult to grow inside. But basically you can eat all of this or use it for medicinal uses. And of course you also have the smell. And the funny thing is that just by having the robot lights, because it's the robot light actually, it's a program that looks like random, but it covers all the plants evenly, although it has a playful aspect in it. This prototype also deals with like water conservation and things like that, because we need to think on how can you irrigate like big vertical systems. So the idea was actually to do this on a very large scale and to improve the quality of air and the climate and also humidity. But in addition, you could have the healthy smells also, and to fill a building with these fragrances, the healthy fragrances. Normally, I always bring or create or grow my own plants that have then the time to adapt to very specific conditions. Because here's no daylight, so you know we need to have the thing on all the time. So you have to start training them, and there's a way to do that. But I learned that if you just leave it as they are, so don't fiddle too much, I discovered that they are able to adapt very well. So yes, there's sage, there's marjoram, there's lavender, there is wormwood, there is mint, basil. So there's a variety of. But if we would have a bit more time, because like you need 2 or 3 months in advance, you can do even much more interesting plants that have even more interesting fragrances or properties. And the funny thing is that actually by the moving lights, because there's the thing that people in buildings, they don't notice, most of them don't notice the plants. Actually we have a kind of plant blindness. An Italian plant scientist, Stefana Mancusa, who did a small psychological test, he would show pictures of objects or people or animals in nature, and then he would ask the people, what did you see on the pictures? And most of the people, 99% of the people would say, well, I saw a monkey and I saw a dog with a woman walking in a park. But nobody would say, well, I saw a banana tree or I saw a grass field. We don't seem to see the plants in the image. And that could be explained that maybe in the evolution we were like in a, in a jungle, and so we had to filter out all that green, so that was a good thing. But now, for us, it's a problem because we need to reconnect it biodiversity in a way, for many reasons. By putting this thing in a building, it's actually funny that people go there and notice that there, for example, is a healthy plant or a sick plant, and which they normally don't do. Just by creating this movement, this other layer of mechanical life, to notice to reconnect them actually with the plant. And there's another surprise actually I'm discovering now, that the moving lights actually stimulate the plants to grow really well, and that's something I didn't expect. So it's a kind of prototype which has a couple of systems that you can adapt, change, and experiment with different kind of plants. In my hunt for all kinds of plants, I discovered a small lavender plant outside of my studio, and I knew it was there. It has been there for a long time, but there were just a few of them. And already two biologists told me this is a very rare plant, and I did more research on the plant, and it's true that there were only 2 places in Portugal where they grow, and it's actually outside of my studio. And there's another place near Lizboni that also has, and both places are known. These were the first important ports for the early Arabs, and they've been there for hundreds of years. And in Morocco, this plant is used to wash the equipment and tools to make butter. So it has a very strong antiseptic property, and that's so I actually started to protect the few plants that were outside of my studio, just by no animals, no people. And now after 2 years, there's actually a whole field of them. And I did a lot of research on how they grow and how you can propagate them and what they do, because it's a very strange plant that has incredible ways to adapt itself to all kinds of conditions. It can go dormant for many years when it's very dry, and they pop up immediately with some moisture, and they propagate through roots but also through seeds. And so it's a very interesting plant that has very interesting properties, and I actually think I was maybe intoxicated or fell in love with the smell, which is very specific and but very special, I think. So but the research, so to see how this plant, because I'm now comparing the plant that's growing in Morocco and the plant that's in front of my studio, that there are different varieties. So it has been adapting itself or something, it's a different plant. So the research is actually to see if it was disseminated by people or that is a variety on its own. So it's a bit of a side project, but also the goal is to multiply the plants and actually to create more, to have more of the substances to work also in my art. There are some in the boxes. So I germinated some like 50 or 60 little small plants that maybe can stay in Slovenia and see how they adapt here. I think the technical understanding of things came from my early youth. My grandfather was an airplane technician, and I've always loved to work with him. He had a small workshop in his house that nobody was allowed in, but I was allowed in, and we would work together. And I always remember that it was a kind of, when something succeeded in a kind of thing you wanted to make, so the making itself had a kind of transcendental effect on me, so that you were completely into the problem solving. And when I went to art school and I studied sculpture, I was always interested to add the element of time, so another dimension in the work. So movement was the first logical step to do that, and to create things that were more complicated than the kinetic art we saw before. But so I was not really interested in the technological part, but I really wanted to create things. So I needed that technical background or technical knowledge to actually create what I wanted to create. I just needed to study that. And so the mechanical part, but also the computer or the coding part, because when I started art school, there was no microcontrollers. I think we had 2 computers in the whole school. So what I decided in those 2 years, just to only learn how to program, and then came the microcontroller. So I was able to give them, in a way, a little piece of my soul through the programming. And that gave me a lot of possibilities to experiment with the movement instead, and also more unexpected. You could do more unexpected and of course more interactive. Of course, the microcontroller gave me a lot of possibilities to work with, but always combined with the mechanical part, which I basically do myself. And I just really love to learn skills. So, for example, now also with the essential oils, I love to really learn how to make those things, and I also made my own equipment to do it, because I was very frustrated with the equipment that was on the market and very expensive. So I made this whole laboratory that's actually also almost all controlled by microcontrollers. You can make a lot of mistakes with this process, and you can lose a lot of valuable plants by just one mistake. So I thought, well, I don't want this, and I wanted to have all the safety mechanisms, so you can sometimes it's like 3 days of work to collect the plants, and then if you destroy it, that's horrible. When I cultivate on the land, of course, most plants that's where they should be in the ground. But I also notice, and that has to do more with my experience now, that actually the climate is changing, and there's problems to grow plants, because, for example, winters where are getting really cold, and there's almost no spring. So you go from the cold almost immediately into the heat, and that's a problem, because the time frame to grow your small plants is becoming smaller and smaller, and the winters are getting so. I think that's why I created the grow boxes, because I can do that in my flat in Amsterdam in winter and prepare them for spring. And so it's a functional thing, and I can create almost 300 plants in a very short period. And there was just a necessity to grow my own herbs. But also the idea is that maybe we have to reinvent the gardens, the zoos, the parks, because those will be the places that we can still reconnect with biodiversity. And it's for many reasons very important that we still have this connection. So I wouldn't say, this is a futuristic, but it's also to question, do we want gardens like this? Or what kind of gardens could we imagine? But I think technology, inventions or things could help us to reconnect with biodiversity, actually to see more, to perceive more than we do now, and to perceive what the plants actually are doing, and how they're breathing, and how they're communicating. There's ways we could show that to children, because I think it's for children very important to see what's going on and to get this understanding. In 50 years, 80% or more of all the people in the world will be living in cities. So where are there possibilities to still, connect with this natural life and biodiversity and plants? So this work in a way tries to, question all the things. Are we going to materialize the plant even more? Because we know there's a huge crisis in agriculture. People think everything is all right, but there's a huge crisis with water management. So there's a lot of crisis at the moment. So how are we going even further to materialize the plant, or can we think of other ways to use the plant? sense, basic senses of where more or less where the people are, but they react to each other because actually it creates a kind of perfume in real time. So there's in total there's six smells, and then the computer in a way creates every time a new, well, I would call it a fragrance combination or orchestrated fragrance. So that's the most important, that actually it creates in real time and it changes. But of course in a small space it's sometimes difficult because it starts to mix everything. So sometimes you need to ventilate and then you can go. There's two very old, very ancient smells, is the cypress and the laurel there inside. And those are, I think, we connect very to a religious kind of thing. And of course, in ancient times, like smells were always used, of course, with, rite de passage or ceremonies. So, yes, the cypress is very, has a very religious connotation. I normally always start with a soundtrack in most of my pieces. I start with the sound and then I synchronize, like actually almost like in an animated film. So I synchronize every little detail of movement to that sound. And here the machine itself makes a sound, but the things are programmed to really synchronize with the sound and the movement of the motors. So in a way that gives me the possibility to orchestrate. I think sometimes I see myself not even as like a visual artist, but more a choreograph. That's for me the most interesting part, actually, when the sculpture is there, that then starts the choreography. So the choreography is for me actually the most important. And this is actually the first exhibition when there's no underlaying soundtrack, but still the choreography, still the movements are choreographed very precisely. And what I said, so it has a kind. Sometimes it goes really in a structure, and then the structure breaks apart, and it will go random. But even though all plants get the same amount of light.